Mearsheimer wrote this book, The Israel Lobby, which was based on it was an extended, expanded version of a report they had done, which was published in a journal in London. And I think really to understand what that was all about, and there was a great controversy surrounding that book, it comes back to what we were talking about before the break, and that is the fact that Mearsheimer and Walt were not just acting on a whim. They were not just two people who suddenly got up one day and said, well, we're very distinguished professors who we're going to criticize the Israeli lobby. They were influenced from behind the scenes by other influential academics, by other influential people who came to them and said, hey, look, we have a very serious problem in this country and in the world today with the influence and the power of the Jewish lobby and the very well-heeled forces that are behind it. And we have a lot of people who are criticizing them quietly. We have people who are writing about them and talking about them, but we need someone with a big academic names, people who are respected within the foreign policy establishment, to come out publicly and say what so many other people like Texe Marrs and Mike Piper are saying. Now, I'm not saying that these people actually pointed out Texe Marrs and Mike Piper, but I mean, what they were saying is that, look, we need some big, distinguished names in the foreign policy realm to stick your necks out. We need you to come out there and act as lightning rods. We need you to come out there and say these things that need to be said and get this debate started. Well, their book was published, and it did create controversy. They were attacked repeatedly. They were called anti-Semites, but it got public discussion going. And it was around that time, and this kind of ties into what I've done with the book, The Caiaphas Complex. At the time that came out, their book, The Israel Lobby, and their report, I sent it to some of my former school teachers in my hometown and to some other opinion makers in various places, and said, hey, look, here are these two distinguished professors. They are saying what I have been saying for years, and people pointed at me and said, well, Piper's a nut, or he's an extremist, or he's a this, or he's a that. But these guys are saying exactly what I've been saying. And this is the kind of thing that wakes people up. And what I'm sure, based upon a variety of things that I read about Walt Mearsheimer, that is exactly what happened. That there were some influential people who came to Walt Mearsheimer and said, look, even if you lose your jobs because of this, even if you lose some money this way or that way, we'll take care of you guys. But we need somebody of some substance in the academic and foreign policy community to finally come out and say enough is enough. We've got to re-examine the relationship with Israel and Zionism. And so that's what that was all about. And that's why it so upset the Jewish lobby in this country, because they were being challenged.
So they
publicly
they
challenged.
Seem to,
and they knew that even though there was just these two lonely professors speaking out publicly, those two lonely professors represented powerful forces behind the scenes.
Yeah, one of them was from Harvard University, the John F. Kennedy School of Government, I believe. The other was University of Chicago. So very, very in foreign policy, that's at the very top most levels. Now, tell us a little bit about the CIA. Actually, it was the 16 intelligence agencies that refused to go along with the Israel lie and the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney lie about Iran having nuclear weapons.
Well, now, that's a perfect example there, Tex, of how we do see manifestations, public manifestations of behind-the-scenes opposition to the Jewish lobby and the big financial interests that bankroll it, these people that have connections in the media, the Federal Reserve, et cetera. The Caiaphas complex, as I've called it. Well, what happened? We had all this propaganda in the mass media that, Iran is building nuclear weapons, and it's not only a threat to Israel, but it's a threat to Western civilization itself. The Iranians, if they don't attack the United States, they might give the weapons to terrorists who will attack the United States. This is the constant grind coming out of Fox News, which is, of course, controlled by Rupert Murdoch, who's a pro-Zionist billionaire. The constant grind coming out generally from the mass media in one form or another. So you had all this propaganda coming out there, And even President Bush at the time was making these noises and saying, oh, they had just fought a war against Iraq over nuclear weapons, which of course never existed. And of course, yet still the American people were being ratcheted up for yet another war in defense of Israel because of nuclear weapons. Of course, Israel's allowed to have nuclear weapons, even though they don't officially admit to it. But no other country in the Middle East is allowed to. And the very idea that Iran might even be working on nuclear power, which doesn't even necessarily imply nuclear weaponry, is just too much for Israel. So we have all this propaganda coming out constantly in the news that, oh my God, Iran is getting ready to blow up the world. And yet what happens? 16 different American intelligence agencies from the various military divisions, from the CIA, probably even the FBI, all these different intelligence agencies, most of which we've never even heard of, or most Americans have never heard of, together as one voice, they give out their national intelligence estimate during I think it was the last year of the Bush administration, and they say, nope, nope, nope. Now, what they were telling us was everything you've heard from the Israeli lobby, everything you've heard from President Bush, everything you've heard from Fox News, everything you've heard from the Prime Minister of Israel, everything you've heard from John Hagee isn't true. Iran isn't anywhere close to building a nuclear bomb. So, this is a major news story, Tex. And it was reported in the mass media. It was reported. But the thing is, most Americans seeing the report, in your average small town newspaper, like in the little central Pennsylvania town, the rural community where I grew up, a story like that might be relegated to a 3 or 4 paragraph story that might be on page 1.
Well, Michael,
or it might be a little 1 paragraph story.
But here's the whole thing about it. If you just think of it just a moment, this is wonderful good news. Because they're telling us we may have to go to war, Israel is, and the Bush White House, and even now, Barack Obama's continued the lie, and they're telling us we're going to have to go to war with Iran. It will cost you trillions of dollars. We'll probably have to cut your Social Security and all these other entitlements, Medicare, to pay for it. And many thousands, who knows how many, 2,000, 20,000, 50,000 Americans will die. The price of gasoline, because the Gulf will be closed up, could shoot up to, $10 or $20 a gallon. That will break the back of the American economy. But it's necessary to stop those mushroom clouds, the weapons of mass destruction from these maniacs, the Ayatollahs and Ahmadinejad from Iran. We've got to go to war. And suddenly, the world's greatest intelligence agencies, all 16 of them, and you mentioned some of them, and of course I'm thinking of the National Security Agency also, the National Reconnaissance Organization, which has all the satellites in space, and there's the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Naval Intelligence Agency. All of them together signed a document saying, ain't so. Now, Iran has no nuclear weapons, is not developing a nuclear weapon, and if they even started today, it would be 10 years from now before they get their first nuclear weapon. That has to be such good news. You would think that Bill O'Reilly and Brian Williams and Rachel, the lesbian Madoff, and all of them would be saying, wonderful news today. This is the greatest news. We're going to save trillions of dollars. We're going to save thousands of lives, because now we know from America, the world's greatest intelligence agencies, there's no threat from Iran. You would think that the Associated Press, everybody would breathe a sigh of relief. Americans who drink would go get drunk. I would just go get a big Coca-Cola with my wife, Wanda. We would celebrate with a piece of apple pie. And you people at AFP would be, sitting around clapping. Thank God for the truth of these. But instead, you go around to Americans and say, do you really think, my own sister, she says, we've got to do something because Iran has nuclear weapons. And I said, well, did you know about these 16 intelligence agencies, what they said? She said, never heard of that. Never heard of it.
Yeah, precisely. And what it represents is precisely what I was talking about, the fact that there are these good people in the military, in the intelligence agencies, in law enforcement, in the diplomatic community, people whose names and faces we don't know now and we probably never will know, but they are in there fighting for America, fighting for us, fighting against the powers that be. Now, the president couldn't fire all of them. You know what I mean? It's like they all stood up together as one voice and said, hey, there was not one lone dissenter there.
Yeah.
And those people, those 16 agencies, most of whose names are totally unfamiliar to Americans, I wouldn't have even thought of the National Reconnaissance Agency or the organization, NRO. If you hadn't mentioned it, if my life depended on it, I wouldn't have even thought of them if I had to list those agencies. So,
hey, you know what, Michael? It just came to me.
Yeah, there you go.
I wonder if when this report came out, it made Dick Cheney furious, right?
Oh,
he had to have blown his top.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was around the time when he shot one of his best friends in the face in South Texas on the hunting preserve.
That mad.
Yeah, but there must be a link there somewhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that in my mind.
Yeah.
But I mean, but the point is that this is why and as I mean, you, Tex, and me, and all your listeners. That's why we all need to continue doing what we're doing, telling our friends and neighbors about facts just as this. That's a perfect example of something that people need to know about.
Yeah.
You know,
it's war, it's death. All these things that you talk about in your book that are of such vital importance.
It's all there. And, this is a point I try to convey to people, that so much of this information, good, solid information, not rumor. I mean, it's right there. It was published in the newspapers.
In the New York Times.
Nobody understood the importance of it. When I say nobody, I mean most of the people didn't understand the importance of it. And that's why there are still people who, even the day after that was published in the newspapers, even if it was buried in the papers or even if it was even on the front page, and it was on the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post. But see, there's the thing. This goes to show you the power of money, the power of the Jewish lobby. Even though the intelligence agencies have come together and said this, and it's reported on the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post, the political forces, the public political forces, the members of Congress, their staff, people who are bought and paid for by the Israeli lobby, which influences Capitol Hill, even though our intelligence agencies said all these things, they still turn around and say, oh, but we have to protect Israel, and we have
that is a good point. So Republican, the head of the House, the Speaker, Boehner, or the Democrat, head of the Democrats there, Nancy Pelosi, they're still, the next day, they just go out and pretend this report never came out.
Exactly. But the fact is that there are all those good people in those agencies who know what they found themselves. They know what they saw in their studies, okay? They know that they're being ignored, and that makes them mad. And I'll tell you what, I just this past weekend, I don't want to reveal either of the names, but it may come out publicly here in the next few days. But a very well-known former CIA officer had occasion to have lunch with a friend of mine here in the Washington, D.C. area the other day. And this friend of mine, whose name I could mention, but I don't want to, his name is fairly well-known, pretty well-known. I think a lot of your listeners would know his name. He had lunch with this former CIA official, and the CIA official told him flat out and quite frankly that all of the people in the intelligence agencies, now, of course, it may not be every single person in the intelligence agencies, but the way he put it was all of the people in all of our intelligence agencies hate Israel. They hate the Israeli lobby. They hate what Israel and its lobby are doing to the United States and American foreign policy.
Wow.
Now, he said, unfortunately, though, he added, he said,